And so many different themes are emerging this morning. We have a community in Kiskamahook who are saying we're not going anywhere. They're sitting under the shade of a tree, but feeling truly discomforted over the last 26 years that their very real issues around land reform haven't been dealt with. You go to a community on Gauteng's East Rand where they're worried about spiraling levels of crime. You go to another area where there are social development issues. Unlike the 1994 moment where the victory was singular, it was all about dismantling the edifice, the insidious edifice of apartheid. This time, the reasons why people are voting are myriad and very personal.
Yes, definitely, Iman. And I think that this temper we saw in Kiskamahook, I think, just signifies the importance of these elections and captures the mood, at least leading up to the elections or the elections climate. In terms of the elections climate, it captures grievance politics being at the forefront, or something that characterizes the climate of elections currently. And these grievances are multi-layered. Firstly, we have communities that are frustrated with political processes, with the outcomes of democracy. Secondly, we just saw Zianda now at Nkandla at a new political party home, which is the MK party. These grievances also speak to intra-party politics. There has been grievances within different political parties. That's why we have so many splinter groups. So the significance of these results lie in how the intersection between community grievances or voters' grievances intersect with grievances from political party. And in terms of significance of the elections, I think that December again there showed how important these elections are for the consolidation of the democratic project. Yes, South Africa has transitioned into a democracy. We're currently transitioning. But has the democratic project been consolidated? This is quite a significant question when we contrast the procedural democracy we currently have and the substantive democracy that people want our government to achieve. Look, procedurally, we vote. We have institutions in place. Every 5 years or so, we're given an opportunity to elect the kind of leaders that we want to see at the forefront of our government. But in terms of substantive democracy, has democracy delivered the socio-economic transformation and changes that people had hoped for? And that's why I say these elections are quite significant regarding the consolidation of the democratic project.
I think that these elections are going to be an absolute dream for people like yourself and researchers who look at the trends. Once all the dust is settled, the results are announced, and we can see exactly how everything stacks up with the introduction of new innovations in this election, the emergence of more political parties, the presence of independent candidates, the 3 ballots, the fact also that the IEC has announced that for the first time since the first democratic election results, they won't be declared on the Saturday, but after the elections, 1 day later than usual, on Sunday, the 2nd of June, and it's going to give them additional time to count the votes and so on. There are going to be a number of new scenarios for us to evaluate, and the success of newly introduced legislation on the characterization of our proportional representation system. As you think about how you're going to respond to what I've just put to you, I want to reflect to our viewers what you're seeing in a picture there in your screen is the Premier of Limpopo, Stan Matabata, also preparing to cast his ballot there. I don't know if we can take a full picture just to show you exactly what that live action is at that location. And we do have our reporters there. We'll get a reflection on what he is going to say and his reaction after voting. Let's listen in a little bit.
The qualifier for the ballot papers, and the qualifier for the national ballot paper, and the provincial ballot paper, and the regional ballot paper. And then whatever the footer and stamp, and then the Hopalawa is the voter. That footer and the ballot paper, like Matlala at the ballot paper. Thank you.
Matlala, as we keep the picture on what's happening there in Mpumalanga, let's talk about what we've just kind of foreshadowed now, the interesting trends that are likely to emerge.
I think you mentioned a very interesting aspect about the introduction of a regional ballot, a national ballot with the national compensatory ballot. In essence, the national vote has been split into two. That would make it quite tricky to forecast, or at least make some sort of predictions on how the elections are likely to go. That split was necessitated by legislative changes, obviously. But one would have to ask, even though legislation has been changed to accommodate independent candidates, have informal institutions and the political climate or landscape made concomitant adjustments to actually receive those independent candidates? And I think that's some of the things that we need to watch out for. What is coming out in terms of how these independent candidates are received? Because change in legislation does not necessarily automatically translate into acceptance of independent candidates on the ground.
And they will certainly have both their position and their influence tried in how things, again, how they finally stack up and what it actually means in terms of that representation in Parliament. And we know that there were all of these criticisms around the number of signatures indicating support before they could be, they could emerge and be approved as independent candidates, a higher threshold than some were saying for political parties. So that created a really interesting complexity as South Africa innovates and then adjusts, you know, to those innovations. But by and large, Matlala, this is about every single family in the country. It represents their aspirations, the people that they see reflecting their needs and their priorities. We hear some people, you know, who've been sort of legacies in the institutional parties in the country say the reasons why they would still vote the way that they always have historically. Others are willing to give new parties and emerging parties that have captured their imagination, their allegiance and their vote. What are some of the other sort of delicious and interesting factors that you would say have emerged from these elections? And by the way, watch picture with me. As soon as Stan Matabata is finished casting his ballot, maybe we'll go there and get a comment from him. Yeah, go ahead.
I think, Iman, we did mention earlier that almost about 28 million people have registered to vote in this current election. I think that sums up the varied nature of interests that are at play to kind of pick the most emerging reasons why people would want to vote or the significance of the elections to them. It'll be quite difficult in a sense because by its very nature anyway, human behavior is not necessarily predictable and
human experience as well. Very different.
Definitely.
Because you could be living, you know, 3 suburbs away from someone else and have a completely different experience of what democracy means, you know, for you. So, you know, it's a many-headed tail.
yes, there's too many fault lines in South Africa. Ethnicity, cultural divides, socioeconomic classes. As you say, you could literally live 3 streets away, 3 blocks away from someone who has different lived experiences in comparison to your own lived experiences. So those kind of things actually make the interest that people vote for quite varied when we approach these elections.
I want to talk about the test and the acid test for the IEC in these elections. We've done many interviews with people who are in the observer missions, who have given South Africa really flying colours when it comes to creating the democratic framework for people to exercise their votes. You have the IEC, which has in an unprecedented way perhaps come under so many challenges to decisions that it's made, some of them reaching all the way to the apex court in the country, managing a complex election with a different ballot paper as well. Hearing stories from people of not being able to vote. And I was just seeing, I can't find it exactly right now, but we were talking to the UDM's Abantu Holomisa a little bit earlier on, and he was not able to vote at the voting station that he had signed up to vote at, and then had to move somewhere else. And then I think I saw a tweet from him probably about 40 minutes ago saying finally he's reached his destination. But it can be a frustrating process for some people. For others, it has been completely smooth. It's been a 10-minute exercise. Many people are waiting in line for many hours and saying they will do so until they get to cast their ballot. Let's talk about the muscularity that is necessary for the IEC in this moment to be able to pivot and be agile with all of these challenges and maintain their credibility. They have to declare, the election result as free and fair at the end of all of this, and we can't have issues and scandals.
True. And I think, Iman, the Kiksama Hook story about a land claim that took more than 28 years or so kind of captures the inability of the state to provide services efficiently. And remember that IEC, as an institutional organization of government, is not excused from the deficiencies in capabilities. I mean, we talk about state capability every day. The IEC is not immune to those capability deficiencies. Firstly, you mentioned something about election signature requirements leading up to these elections for new political parties and independent candidates. Legislative changes were made, but the IEC itself was not necessarily capacitated to have safeguards and verification measures on the authenticity of those signatures. Already there's legislative changes, but have capacity been augmented to actually tally up with the legislative changes and the way of doing things now. Another thing that indicates the inability of the IEC, for instance, to actually effectively carry out or oversee the elections was those kind of instances in
Kiskama
Hook, thanks. I think in the security planning, those kind of things ought to be anticipated. What has the IEC done to actually deal with those kind of instances where people do not necessarily show up, or people who actually protest and block others in terms of exercising their political rights? Has the IEC done enough to anticipate those kind of instances? And when they have anticipated those instances, what kind of measures have been put in place?
Matlala, this is the moment of truth in terms of the new innovations that have been introduced for the IEC. How they rise to that challenge, I think, is going to be really a defining moment for them as well. Thank you so much for being with me today and for your time and your analysis. Matlala Setlhalogile, we really appreciate your input today.